Good morning, I'm Robert Tan. Join us as we follow the money from the financial choices that shape your daily life to the bigger forces driving the economy. The headlines. The United States and Iran are close to reaching a deal that could help end the war. But U.S. President Donald Trump says no rush. Yet global oil prices fall sharply to their lowest in 2 weeks. And what if your most engaged employees are the ones closest to burning out? Or is that you? We discuss this with organizational psychologist Dr. Marshall Valencia straight ahead. After more than 3 months of war, the United States and Iran may be close to finally reaching a deal. But U.S. President Donald Trump says he is not rushing. Trump said the blockade on the Strait of Hormuz remains in full force until an agreement is signed. That statement comes a day after he announced a peace agreement with Iran had been largely negotiated subject to finalization. A senior U.S. official said it could take several days for a deal to be approved as crucial details are still being negotiated. The official adds that Iran's supreme leader has approved a broad template of the agreement. But whether this will turn into a final agreement is still an open question. Global oil prices fell to their lowest in 2 weeks. The benchmark Brent crude is now trading below $100 per barrel, down more than 4%. The dollar also weakened, offering some relief for the Philippine peso. But the peso is still trading now at the 61 level, putting renewed pressure on the government's economic playbook. Economists say the central bank can only do so much as fuel prices, food security, and investor confidence become bigger tests for the Marcos administration. Chesulit has the details.
The Philippines has a flexible exchange rate system. Economist Jonathan Ravela says there is a silver lining amid concerns over the continued weakening of the peso against the U.S. dollar.
A weaker peso, in the eyes of foreigners, we are cheap. So this will eventually boost remittances and it will narrow the deficit. It's always a balance.
Philippine Exporters Confederation or PhilExport President Sergio Ortiz Luis Jr. also says that apart from OFWs, many industries including local manufacturing could also become more competitive.
Marami ng Pilipino ang umaasa sa dollar. Dadagdag mo pa yung exporter, dadagdag mo pa yung mga sa tourism, dadagdag mo pa yung mga farmers na natatalo sa imported na bigas.
But PhilExport warned that the Philippines is falling behind its ASEAN neighbors in exports due to alleged lack of government support. Experts from De La Salle University earlier released a depreciation forecast for the peso. The report said the peso could weaken to 63.50 against the dollar, driven by rising imported oil prices and negative real interest rates. Real interest rates turn negative when inflation is higher than the nominal interest rates charged by banks on loans. Meanwhile, Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas Governor Eli Remolona Jr. said in an interview that a 63.50 peso to dollar exchange rate would be okay as long as the movement is measured. But a senior cabinet official who spoke on the condition of anonymity criticized the remark. Ravelas came to the defense of the BSP. He says the central bank was not defending a peso level but managing volatility and inflation risks. He also said the Marcos administration should now address the country's energy resilience and food security challenges.
It has to be controlled 2 ways. We have controlling inflation, and the other one is eventually controlling, sustaining growth. And the BSP can only do so much in adjusting rates. No, it's really about addressing fiscal policies that will address issues of the impact of the oil dilemma.
The experts also urged the government that it is time to give investors more certainty and provide long-term solutions to the country's economic problems. Chesulit, Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Up next, productive but burnt out. The work is getting done, but at what cost? Organizational psychologist Dr. Marshall Valencia joins us next. Keep following the money.
up with Willard Chang.
Sama-sama nating harapin ang umaga. Bago yan, ang headlines.
Go beyond the headlines with Corina Sanchez Rojas.
Ako po ang inyong kaibigan, kabalitan at kakampi. Handa na ba kayo?
Metro Morning with Willard Chang. Monday to Friday, 7 a.m. Back to back with Memo with Corina Sanchez Rojas. Monday to Friday, 7:30 a.m. on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel.
Welcome back to Follow the Money. We all know that employee who always shows up, the one who says yes, the one who is first in, last out, the one who says kaya pa. But the data says that the worker is everywhere in the Philippines, but it also says they may be the most burnt out. And joining us this morning is Dr. Marshall Valencia, President and Research Director of Premier Value Provider. Good morning, Dr. Valencia, and welcome to Follow the Money.
Good morning.
Prof, you surveyed over 8,300 Filipino employees across multiple sectors. Now, when you first saw the complete results, were you surprised at what you saw?
Well, yes and no. I expected to see stress and fatigue, especially after several years of disruption. But what surprised me was the scale of the contradiction. On one hand, engagement was very high in many organizations, but on the other hand, underneath that, workload, work-life balance, recognition, compensation, mental health indicators, they were telling a much more fragile story.
Looking at your data, Professor, your data shows engagement, yes, at 78 to 98%, which sounds like great news, but then there's another set of numbers underneath that which you've mentioned. Now, walk us through what you actually found.
Well, that's exactly the tension in the data. At the surveys level, engagement was very high, but when you go underneath, you see workload satisfaction dropping to as low as 11%. Work-life balance down to 2%. And burnout or depression indicators reaching to almost 50% in some groups. So yes, employees may still say they care, they still show up, they still try, but that does not automatically mean that the system is healthy.
Why do you think that the data shows that? What's the difference now, let's say 10 years back?
Well, probably we were not really measuring it back then. We were so focused on performance metrics that we were not looking at mental health indicators, for example. But pre-pandemic data would already show that 20% at the very least of employees are already suffering at critical levels, and it was compounded even more during the pandemic and even after the pandemic. Yeah.
Now, when you look at your data, what are the age groups that you saw? Is it the younger generation? Is it the older generation? What kind of a mix was there in your data?
Yeah, consistently, it's the younger ones who are most affected. The Gen Zs and the younger millennials.
Why do you think that is?
Well, that trend is actually observed all over the world, across cultures, across organizations. It's consistent, maybe to a large extent. It was the way they were brought up, with so much social media exposure, and so many other social factors that they were not used to, unlike our generation. Right? I'm a Gen Xer.
So you see, before, it was a lot stricter then, and it's still stricter now. Nothing really has changed, but you think the new generation, their mindset is much, much different than the older generation?
Yes, definitely. They were exposed to a different set of, social stimulation. They grew up with a different set of values and expectations from the world around them. So it's a whole new domain for them, I guess.
Do you think social media and technology has a lot to do with that?
Yes, definitely. With social media, social comparison is very easy for them. They get to see what is actually not a very realistic picture of the life of others. So definitely it affects them.
Now, your research shows that up to 89% of employees say they intend to stay. But the ENPS score sits between -2 and +2, meaning they won't recommend working there. Now, how do you explain that combination?
Well, because staying and recommending are not the same thing. People may stay because they need stability, because jobs are hard to replace, or because they still believe in the mission of the organization. But recommending a workplace requires something more. It requires trust, genuinely positive employee experience. So what the data suggests is this: many employees are willing to remain, but they are not enthusiastic enough, to endorse the workplace to others.
Now, your presentation also draws a line between engagement and what you call high-effort equilibrium. For someone watching at home, what's the difference and why does it matter?
Well, engagement means people are psychologically invested in their work. High-effort equilibrium is different. It means the organization is still functioning, but only because employees are compensating for the structural problems through their own personal effort. Overtime, sacrifice, endurance, or pagmamahal para sa bayan, kung sa gobyerno yan.
Do you think much has changed also because we went through the COVID era where everybody was locked in at their homes? There were also a lot of problems in terms of mental wellness, mental health. Do you think that also provided a lot of the data points that you have now, which shows a bit of a difference in terms of the stress level and stress capacity of the generation today?
Yeah, definitely. But what's interesting was that during the pandemic, it was expected. There was a substantial increase in levels of mental health indicators are really high. But what was surprising was after the pandemic, even 2 years after down the line, the numbers didn't go back to the original. In fact, it's almost as if it's still at the pandemic levels. So it hasn't changed that much.
Now, there are also data points in your research that show that workload, we're seeing that as the most consistent risk factor across every sector. Now, what is it about the way Filipino organizations distribute work that keeps showing up in your numbers?
Well, these are things that we continuously overload people. In fact, if you perform well, you are the ones who get most of the job. And then there are a lot of inefficiencies in our system. Automation is not optimized. So all of these things add up to the inefficiency of the design, and it leads to a chronic pressure of work.
Do you also see this like in an organization where teamwork plays a lot in that? And in a team, let's say of 5, let's say only 3 pulls their weight and the other 2 don't really pull their weight, but they get the same compensation, they get the same, when they present, it's as a group, not as an individual. Does that also play a part in the burnout that you're seeing in the data?
Yeah, definitely. Well, teamwork can both be, a positive element. They could help each other out, but that could also lead to what we call social loafing, where some of the teammates are just kumbaga pabigat sila, definitely that could contribute. But if it is managed in a positive way, teamwork can actually elevate the pressure and the burnout and the distribution of work.
I mentioned that, Professor, because you frame burnout not as a wellness issue, but a system design problem. Now, for those CEOs watching right now, what does that distinction mean for how they run their organization? Should they look at it more seriously now on how they should run their organization?
Yes, because traditionally, most people would think that burnout, is just a psychological issue. Therefore, most organizations today treat it using, go to seminars, mindfulness sessions or resilience messaging. Those can help, definitely, but they do not solve the root problem. If burnout is coming from, chronic overload, conflicting priorities, weak systems, poor leadership consistency, and low reward for high effort, then the real intervention is operational and organizational. So, for a CEO, that means, redesigning workload, reducing friction, clarifying accountability, making sure that performance does not, depend on exhaustion.
So like work-life balance.
Yes, definitely.
Now, your data also shows compensation satisfaction at around 30% across sectors. I think we all know that. There's an ongoing debate right now in the country about raising the minimum wage. Now, from what your numbers are telling you today, how does pay actually rank as a driver of the burnout and disengagement that you're seeing in the results of your data?
Okay. Pay, yes, it matters a lot, but usually not in isolation. Compensation becomes, especially powerful when it interacts with high workload, low recognition, and weak perceived growth. No? Employees can tolerate demanding work if they feel the effort is fairly rewarded, and that there is, something for them in the future. But when people feel overworked, under-recognized, underpaid, and going nowhere, that is when, disengagement and burnout will really accelerate.
Now, between the two, recognition and compensation, it's both at 30%. Now, career growth at a critical low, if you could fix one, which one would it be?
Okay, if I could only fix one, I would choose career growth.
Okay.
But only if it's real and visible. Here's why. Recognition, it can improve morale. Compensation, yes, it can reduce immediate stress. But career growth, it changes how people interpret, their sacrifice. When employees believe that there is a future, they can tolerate difficulty differently. But if they feel stuck, then even decent pay and occasional recognition, that won't
It's
be
not enough.
Yeah. Growth is what converts effort into meaning, over time.
Now, having said that, your model tracks something below the visibility line, hidden productivity loss, innovation decline, deep organizational fatigue. How long can an organization run that way before something breaks? And how can they see it early on and fix it?
Well, longer than leaders think, but not in a safe way. That's the danger. Organizations can run on hidden strain for months, sometimes years, especially when employees are, conscientious, very committed. But the cost accumulates quietly. Slower thinking, weaker initiative, more rework, more emotional depletion, and eventually higher attrition or performance instability. Now, the problem is not that, it breaks immediately. The problem is that by the time it becomes visible, the organization has
It might be too late.
Yes, it has already absorbed the major losses. So actually, it's the silent period that's, making it more dangerous.
Now, especially now we're in a crisis, do you see the numbers going up and also dissatisfaction going up?
Oh, yes, definitely. The compounding stresses that is coming from, different crises that we are suffering, it's definitely exacerbating everything.
Now, the shift in your presentation is from are employees engaged to is our workforce sustainable? Now, what does a sustainable Philippine workforce actually look like, and does it exist anywhere in your data?
A sustainable workforce is one where performance is not dependent on chronic overexhaustion. It means people are engaged, yes, but they also have manageable workloads. They have fair rewards, visible career pathways, credible leadership, and enough recovery to keep performing over time. In our data, yes, you do see pockets of that, but not consistently. What we more often see is partial strength, high engagement, strong mission alignment, maybe good teamwork, but with serious strain underneath. So sustainability exists in pieces.
In pieces, but not in
Therefore-
totality. Okay.
Yeah.
Professor, before we let you go, we have this portion called the rapid fire questions. It's only answerable by yes or no. It'll just be quick. Let's start with this. Now, with your results out, your research out, the data is there. Has a CEO ever seen your data, nodded, and then done absolutely nothing? Yes or no?
Oh, yes, yes.
If your own workplace were put through the same kind of assessment, would you be comfortable with the results going public? Yes or no?
Yes, definitely.
Is work-life balance in the Philippines so broken that 2% satisfaction is actually not a surprise to you? Yes or no?
Yes.
And finally, Professor, the Filipino worker is engaged, aligned, and staying but burnt out, underpaid, and going nowhere. The data is clear, the cost is real, and someone is going to pay. Now, so tell us, how can they follow the money?
Follow the money by looking at the hidden costs behind apparently stable performance. Burnout, turnover risk, presenteeism, weak advocacy, slower innovation, declining resilience. If leaders want to protect the bottom line, they have to stop treating workforce strain as a soft issue. The real money is lost when organizations mistake endurance for health.
That's great to hear. And thank you, Professor, for your time this morning and the insights and, of course, the results of your research. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that's all for today. I'm Robert Tan. Every day we'll help you make sense of the financial choices and economic forces that shape everyday life. Thank you for watching. Keep it here on the Bilyonaryo News Channel and always follow the money.